Welcome back to the deep dive. If you're a regular listener, you know the rhythm of this show. We usually take a stack of articles or a new piece of research and we mine it for gold.
hmm We look for the actionable takeaway.
The aha moments, the productivity hacks, the insights that help you optimize your life or, understand the news a little better.
Right. We usually operate with a pretty specific goal.
Yeah?
Problem, analysis, solution. We like to wrap things up.
Exactly. But today we are doing something fundamentally different. And I want to be upfront with everyone listening.
Mm.
We're putting the toolkit away.
Yeah.
There are no hacks today. We're turning our attention to a single and I think rather difficult essay. It's titled Darkness is Darkness by the writer and philosopher Pedro Malha.
And this conversation is going to feel different. The text really demands it.
It does. It
Yeah.
explicitly refuses the very things we usually try to provide. There's no silver lining here.
No. There's no 5-step plan to turn your trauma into a superpower. Malha isn't interested in that at all. In fact, he argues that even looking for the fix is part of the problem.
It's almost jarring to read, honestly. The essay opens by acknowledging that expectation that we all have.
That unspoken contract.
Right. Malha writes that usually when we read about difficulty or hardship, there's this sort of contract between the writer and the reader. We expect it to start with a human example, a person, a relatable incident.
Something to invite entry, as he puts it. And then we expect the arc.
The hero's journey, even in miniature. We expect the difficulty to be interpreted, to be given a meaning, and eventually to be resolved.
Editors call it balance. Readers call it hope. Malha calls the methods of making an account easier to carry.
But this text refuses to make it easier to carry.
It refuses.
So if we aren't here to solve anything and we aren't here to find the bright side, what is our mission today?
I think our goal is just to listen, to hold up the mirror that this essay provides and recognize a specific human condition, one that Malha argues is often lived, but rarely described so nakedly.
So we're not here to analyze it to death.
No, we're here to sit with the reality it describes, to accompany it.
Okay. Let's start where the essay begins then. With that refusal of the narrative, Malha states clearly that this text does not move from hardship to insight.
It stays where it is.
And he uses this phrase that I've been thinking about all week. He writes about lives that never become stories.
Such a haunting phrase, lives that resist narrative shape.
Right. And think about how conditioned we are to view our own lives as stories. We have a beginning, a middle, a crisis, an eventual resolution. We look for that arc.
We do. We justify the hard times by saying, oh, this is just the second act conflict. The resolution is coming.
It will all make sense in the end. We treat our life like movies that haven't finished yet.
Precisely. But Malha points out that for some, this arc, it never forms. These lives are not unfinished versions of something brighter.
They're not waiting for the third act where the music swells?
No. They're lived under conditions that simply never organize themselves into a clean story.
That's a terrifying thought for many people, I think. The idea that there isn't a point to the suffering.
Or that it isn't leading somewhere.
And he draws a really sharp distinction here between the outside view of these lives and the inside experience.
Yes. From the outside, the life he describes often appears functional. These aren't necessarily lives of visible chaos.
No, not at all. They pay their bills, they show up to work, they maintain a household, the machinery is running.
But from the inside, he describes the experience as sustained exposure.
Sustained exposure. It implies a lack of shelter, like you're standing in the wind for a decade.
And crucially, he notes, there is rarely a single incident that explains it. We have this instinct, when we see someone who seems hardened.
To ask, what happened to you?
Exactly. We want a specific trauma. A car crash, a divorce, a loss. Something that splits time into before and after.
We want the smoking gun, the origin story.
Right. But here, the condition is cumulative. It's not one event, it's the sediment of years. It's built from repeated negotiations required just to remain present. It's not an explosion, it's erosion.
And this leads us to one of the most resonant ideas in the text for me. And I think this is where the essay starts to get really uncomfortable.
The concept of survival.
Yeah. We usually think of survival as temporary. It's an emergency response. The tiger jumps out, adrenaline kicks in, you survive, and then you go back to safety.
You return to a baseline of calm. That's the ideal. Homeostasis.
But Malha argues that for these lives, survival stops being an emergency response. It becomes the default position.
Imagine that adrenaline spike, that hyperfocus, the tension. But instead of lasting for 10 minutes, It lasts for 10 years.
And what does that do to a person when the emergency is just Tuesday?
It changes the architecture of the mind. When survival is held for that long, it stops feeling temporary. It becomes the baseline. It isn't a spike on a graph anymore. It is the line.
And living in that default position, it must change how you interact with everything.
Fundamentally.
Yeah.
And this is where the essay moves into the mechanics of awareness, how this person learns to see.
He describes it as learning to read everything, and he's so specific about the order of operations.
Reading tone before language.
Reading gesture before statement.
Reading atmosphere before intention.
It's a scanning process. You know, if you feel safe, if you're comfortable, you can afford to take people at their word. You can miss a subtle cue.
Because the consequences of being wrong are low.
Right. But in this cumulative state of survival, misreading the room carries real consequences. If you are not safe, you must be accurate. You have to know what is happening before it happens.
It's predictive, like a radar system that never turns off.
It's preemptive. You're trying to solve the problem before it even arrives in the room.
And what's fascinating and really tragic is how the world misidentifies this. I think a lot of listeners might recognize this in themselves or people they know.
The world sees this hypervigilance, this ability to notice the slightest shift in mood, and calls it sensitivity.
Or worse, strength.
Yeah, you hear people say, oh, you're so intuitive, you're an empath.
But the text, it corrects that perception immediately, ruthlessly. It defines this quality not as strength, and certainly not as some mystical gift.
It's adaptation.
It is adaptation repeated so many times over so many years that it becomes indistinguishable from personality. It looks like who you are, but it's actually what you had to become to avoid consequences.
So it's a shape formed by necessity, not a natural disposition.
And that blurs the line between the self and the defense mechanism. It makes you wonder, is this me or is this just my armor?
Allah suggests there might not be a distinction anymore.
Yeah. And this blurring continues when he discusses relationships. He writes, there is no clear boundary between participation and endurance.
That is a difficult reality to sit with, the idea that you can be participating in a life, in a conversation, in a marriage, but at the same time just be enduring it.
And this brings us to the essay's observations on love. And again, we have to let go of the Hallmark version here.
Right.
Malha describes love, when it appears in these lives, as arriving as labor rather than refuge.
Labor rather than refuge. That is heavy. He says it's given outward because giving reduces friction. It's such a utilitarian view of affection.
It is.
You give not out of an overflow of joy, but because maintaining the connection is, quote, less costly than losing it.
It's a survival calculation, even if it's unconscious. The giving, it looks generous. From a distance, it looks like kindness or devotion.
Being the rock of the family.
Exactly. But up close, the essay describes it as automatic. It's a continuation of that same survival posture. If I am useful, I am safe. If I am giving, I am allowed to stay.
It sounds transactional, but not in a malicious way, in a desperate way.
It's fear-based. And the text is very clear about the result of this. It doesn't sugarcoat it.
No, it says, this does not create belonging, it creates usefulness.
And that distinction is just. It's vital. We need to pause on that. Usefulness versus belonging.
Because usefulness is valued. People can rely on you. They can need you.
The company needs the manager who fixes everything. The family needs the sibling who handles the crises. But being useful isn't the same as being chosen. Mala writes that a person can be central to function yet remain peripheral in meaning.
You make the machinery run, but you aren't the meaning of it. You're the infrastructure. You're the plumbing or the electricity.
Essential, but ignored. And he notes that this distinction is rarely visible to others. Everyone else just sees the helpful, reliable person, but it becomes unmistakable to the one living within it.
And that leads to his specific definition of loneliness. And it isn't about being alone in a room.
No, he's clear. He says it happens in company, it happens in conversation. He defines it as the absence of arrival.
The absence of arrival. Nothing lands, nothing secures itself. You are there physically, you're speaking. But you never fully arrive in the safety of the moment.
You're always holding yourself slightly apart, scanning, working, and the world continues to demand presence from someone it does not entirely receive.
I want to pivot to the concept of resilience. It comes up in the next section of the essay. In our culture, especially in this world of self-improvement, resilience it's the gold standard.
A virtue, a badge of honor.
We put it on resumes, but Malha just reframes it completely.
He strips the virtue right out of it. He frames resilience not as a quality of character, but as a condition imposed early. He writes, hardness is formed because softness proves unsustainable.
You become hard not because you want to be tough, but because being soft resulted in damage.
And there's a cruel paradox there that the essay highlights.
This hardness, which was required to survive this armor, is later judged by the world. People see it as severity or distance.
They might say, why are you so closed off? Or why are you so serious all the time?
It's a perfect trap. The very shape required to withstand the circumstances becomes a reason for exclusion from them.
The armor that kept you alive is the very thing that keeps you from being embraced. You can't be soft enough to be let in because softness was dangerous. But your hardness keeps you outside.
It's a catch-22. If you soften, you break. If you stay hard, you're alone.
Precisely. And he notes that this isn't a choice the person makes in the moment. It was a choice made for them by their history.
The essay also touches on the economic reality that often accompanies this. He makes sure we understand this isn't just an abstract emotional state. It's often tied to material instability.
Right. He writes that effort does not accumulate into ease. It resets repeatedly.
That phrase, resets repeatedly, is exhausting just to hear. It counters that whole narrative of work hard and build.
It describes a life where progress just dissolves. The car breaks down and wipes out the savings. The rent goes up and wipes out the raise. Stability is always temporary.
Starting again is literal. It's not a metaphor for personal growth. It's a literal restarting of life over and over.
There is motion, but no trajectory.
You're moving, you're working, you're trying, you're exhausted, but you aren't going anywhere. You are just maintaining.
And alongside this external spinning, this running in place, an interior world develops. Mala describes this interiority not as a creative escape. It's not a rich inner life in the artistic sense.
He calls it containment.
A place that is not shared. And it isn't shared because, as he says, sharing has historically led to dismissal or harm.
So it's not mystical, it's not romantic, it's just private.
It's maintained because no external environment has proven reliable enough to hold it. The interior becomes the only safe place, not because it's wonderful, but because it's the only place that is yours.
It's a bunker, not a garden.
Yes.
And this brings us to how these lives are placed socially. We've talked about being useful, but the essay goes deeper. It describes a state of being adjacent to recognition.
Included but not integrated. An option rather than his decision. These are incredibly precise descriptions.
You're present, you're on the guest list, you're at the table, but you're not anchored there.
You're seen but not absorbed. You're a satellite.
And because the surrounding structures, the family, the workplace, don't quite know how to place this person, they describe them in contradictions. He notes the individual is frequently described as too much or not enough.
Yes, the labels. Too direct, too silent, too strong, too unyielding.
But then the next day, not resilient enough, too sensitive.
The labels shift depending on what's required in the moment. If the world needs you to be quiet, you are too loud. If it needs you to carry a burden, you are too weak.
He points out that these aren't real evaluations of the person. There are signs that the structure doesn't know what to do with what stands before it.
And over time, it takes a toll on self-perception. The essay says self-reproach becomes habitual. You start blaming yourself.
You assume the defect is in you.
But notice why. This is the key insight. Mala writes that self-reproach becomes habitual, not because it clarifies anything, but because it offers a consistent explanation when no other explanation is available.
Blaming yourself provides a logic. It explains why you're on the periphery. It creates a cause and effect.
It doesn't fix it, but it accompanies the experience. It makes the randomness feel manageable.
It's easier to believe I am the problem than the world is indifferent.
Exactly. It gives you a sense of agency, even if that agency is destructive.
And yet, the life continues. That's one of the most stubborn facts of this essay. This life does not announce itself as tragic.
There's no breakdown. There's no cinematic moment of collapse where the hero falls to their knees in the rain.
It works. It participates.
From a distance, it looks like determination. It looks like grit. But Mala warns us, continuation is not transformation.
Just because you keep going doesn't mean you have overcome.
Endurance does not convert itself into meaning simply by lasting. You can endure for a lifetime, and it remains just that endurance. There is no alchemy that turns pain into wisdom automatically. Sometimes pain is just pain.
As we move toward the end of our time with this text, I want to emphasize what the essay calls the commonality. Because listening to this, and I feel it even recording this, it feels intensely solitary.
It does. It feels like a description of a person entirely alone in the universe.
And that is the final illusion the essay dispels. It states, this is not a rare configuration.
It appears repeatedly. It's happening right now in different settings across different histories. It's happening in the office next to you. It's happening in your family tree.
But the people living it may never recognize one another, because nothing about the experience declares itself openly.
It's maintained privately. These lives don't gather into a club. They don't have a flag. They remain dispersed.
And they're often translated by others into acceptable narratives. The person enduring is called stoic or independent.
Or low maintenance. The reality is paved over with words that make it comfortable for everyone else. If we call you low maintenance, we don't have to worry about maintaining you.
Malha notes that while it feels personal,
Yeah.
intensely personal, the construction is impersonal.
The world produces these conditions without noticing. It's like a machine that creates this outcome over and over, and the outcome persists without requiring recognition.
And here, we have to adhere strictly to the end of the text. There is a temptation, even now, for us to try and wrap this up.
I feel it. The urge to say, but if you just reach out, or if you just reframe.
Me too. We want to find the so what, to find the key that unlocks the door.
But there is no concluding lesson to draw from that. We can't wrap this up with a, so here's what we can do better. The essay explicitly states, no corrective perspective follows.
The observation does not lead outward into resolution. It remains where it began.
It's just describing something that exists, whether or not it's spoken about. It is an act of witnessing, nothing more.
And nothing less. Sometimes witnessing is the only thing that hasn't happened yet.
And so, to end this deep dive, I simply want to repeat the final sentiment of Pedro Malha's essay, directly to you, the listener. We aren't going to tell you how to fix it. We aren't going to tell you it gets better.
But if you have recognized the landscape we've described today, if you have felt the weight of these observations,
The observation remains where it began.
if you see yourself here, that is not an accident. I see you.